Albert Einstein, Pablo Picasso, Aretha Franklin. So I know, like, pick your genius. With a trinity like that in the previous seasons of National Geographic's Genius, the anthology series clearly had to do things, take it to a whole new level, which they did with the fourth season, MLK-X. Premiering at the Smithsonian, the February 1st debuting 8-episode season offered a new take on the lives and legacies of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. This was not just the story of great men. It was the story of how these very different men, played by Kelvin Harrison Jr. and Aaron Pierre, became icons and inspirations through the times they lived in, the streets and faith they came from, and the women who stood beside them. Dr. King and Malcolm only ever met but once in 1964 during the Senate debate on the Civil Rights Act, but MLK-X shows us how their paths were always entwined with each other in history. So please welcome to Contenders, MLK-X executive producers, Reggie Bythewood, Gina Prince-Bythewood, Raphael Jackson Jr., and Damione McDonald, showrunners. As always, before we talk about the panel, let's watch a clip from MLK-X.
What do you think of the Senate debate?
Well, the debate's a con game, threatening to provoke a race war if the government's not serious about civil rights enforcement.
Do you support changes to the bill?
No, the bill should be passed exactly as written with no changes, but the struggle for black equality won't end. You can't legislate goodwill.
Are you suggesting that people fear many of your views?
Well, I'm not surprised that some may fear the truth, but my two eldest daughters sit either side of me on the couch when I show them my butterfly collection. Ask them if anyone should fear me.
You have a butterfly collection.
Oh, yes, I admire the butterfly. They start off crawling, clinging to life, moving slowly in the dirt, hoping not to be stepped on. Then one day, they are transformed into something beautiful that can fly without limitations. Now, isn't that something truly revolutionary? There's a lesson in that, if you're willing to learn it.
Dr. King, how do you respond to Senator Thurman threatening to filibuster the Civil Rights Bill?
Well, I'm here today during this critical debate to convince his fellow senators to do otherwise. But I assure you, we will not be content even after this bill is passed. The failure to pass the bill would thrust our nation into a dim horizon of social turmoil.
Are you suggesting there might be violence if the bill is defeated?
Realism impels me to admit that if the bill is not passed, it'll be harder to keep the struggle disciplined.
Reverend,
Minister,
I've been hoping for this day for a long time. We meet at last.
it seems like we've attracted quite a bit of attention. What makes me think you may have invited them?
No, I'm sure they must be here for you, Doctor. One thing's for certain, you're now going to be investigated.
Well, I have it on good authority. My file is already much larger than yours.
Who do you think this is going to hurt more, you or me?
I imagine it's unlikely to hate either one of us.
Well, then let's keep them guessing.
Amen to that.
All praise to Allah. We should do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
I talked about it in the introduction, about how the previous seasons of Genius had dealt with one particular individual. Clearly, this season broadens the aperture. In many ways, you could say it's a Fantastic Four because of Betty and Coretta as well. How did that come together, Reggie?
Well, we were asked by Imagine Entertainment and Nat Geo if we would be interested in taking on Genius Season 4. There was great interest in doing a season about Dr. King. And Gina and I spoke about it and, you know, really found a way to say you don't get to have Dr. King without Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. And really leaned in to explain why that was and how in many ways they were, you know, opposite sides of the same coin and how the movement needed both of them. And as you relayed as well, we also really wanted to lean into Coretta and Betty And so really gave them a great pitch, we thought, of why this was really profound, and fortunately they bought in.
I think also part of it was, growing up so many of us are told you have to choose. Do you follow Dr. King? Do you follow Malcolm? And for us, we wanted to show that you don't have to choose. We needed both, and they influenced both, and they became who they were because of each other.
Raphael and Damione, a show like this, any show has a multitude of moving parts. But this one specifically, because you're dealing with two of the most well-known men in modern American history, and you're telling a story of their lives before they were those men, before they were the icons. What were some of the challenges that brought to you, and how did you do, did you work with a group of historians? How did you bring together all that knowledge?
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. We, prior to starting our writer's room, Reggie, Gina, Raph, and I, and our pilot writer, Jeff Stetson, participated in a think tank, which gathered a multitude of historians, some folks who knew either Martin or Malcolm, to kind of give us the behind-the-scenes insight as to who they were as people. It was important that we started there, and I've said a couple times, I have a degree in history. And so I went into it very cocky. I felt like I'm gonna know exactly who these men are. I know everything. And about an hour and a half in, I was texting Raphael over the Zoom, like, I didn't know that. And I didn't know that. And I didn't know that.
You guys in the chat, like?
Yeah, oh yeah. And that was the impetus of what the birth of the series was, is those aha moments. We wanted the audience to have several aha moments of the things they didn't know, accompanied by learning about those two men. So it was a really fun and interesting endeavor that we got to do at the beginning of the series.
Raphael, that process that Damien's talking about, I guess in a sense there was a lot you had to leave out as well.
Yeah, it was a lot you had to, pick and choose behind the series design within it. And I think a lot of that was born out of the think tank that we just mentioned. We had people like, Dr. Peniel Joseph, who wrote Sword and the Shield, which we, based a big part of the series on. We had Jeff Stetson. We also had Dr. Barbara Reynolds, different historians who we were able to kind of get the information about Martin and Malcolm and Betty and Coretta and see how we can craft a story that shows the parallels, shows what both these icons went through, and told a story, ultimately, which is what we really attempted to do. So within that process, yeah, there were some things that you had to leave out, but it was done in an effort to kind of craft something that we feel that is not only educational, entertaining, but impactful.
Gina, one of the things about this season of Genius is, I think at least, maybe more than other seasons, there is a timeliness to this particular season. In an America that I think we could politely say is divided, you see a look at a time when, once again, we saw this. I know you as a filmmaker, you're always aware of the way, for lack of a better expression, something's going to land. What were the issues here about how you saw, how is an audience of 2024 going to hear this story that, in a sense, reaches its climax in 1964? And so, how did you roll that out?
We certainly are putting out this show at a time where our history is literally under attack. It's being erased, it's being rewritten. And so to be able to tell the story of these two men and two women, to reclaim the history and the truth was so imperative to us, and that was really our North Star. Just listening to some of the speeches that they were giving, you could literally give them today. And so the immediacy was really impactful to us as well, the fact that people need to hear these words today.
It was just, one of the things that we also talked about in great detail is, we would use the term, but we don't want it to feel like a museum piece. It is so timely. Really love the work that Raphael and Damione did. Just for point of reference, this is the first time that Gina and I had an idea that neither one of us wrote or directed. We brought in some really great showrunners, and
how did that feel for you? Is that kind of like, okay, can I let go of the reins, or was it like?
Yeah, I mean, like this panel is the first time we've actually said hello to each other since production. No, I'm just kidding.
The flowers keep them apart from each other. Exactly.
Yeah, it was great. It was the first time that they ran a show, and it was just also like very gratifying for them to have this opportunity and for us to have this opportunity, and also just like this vision we have of it being contemporary, just even down to the music and the storytelling and just how accessible we wanted it to be for a contemporary audience.
To that point, and you know, when you deal with stories that have a racial background or a historical background, there's an impetus, not by anybody in this room, to treat it like a homework assignment. Like, I gotta watch this. And what we wanted to do by casting younger versions of Martin and Malcolm, Betty, and Coretta was this is an entertainment piece as well. We want you to come in and be engaged by the incredible acting by Kelvin Harrison, Aaron Pierre, Weruche Opia, and Jamie Lawson, bringing these people that we think we know to life and seeing them in love and seeing them make mistakes and fall down and get back up. And so it isn't a homework assignment. This isn't something that requires you to watch once. We want you to lean in, be engaged, like Reggie said, by the music, be engaged by the similarities that we all see in ourselves in the mistakes and the successes that these four icons had. And so that was a really big deal for us, and hopefully pulled it off.
No tabs, no tabs. No tabs.
You know, I think we also I think that we also had like a really great time talking about the age and the ages of the characters and how that was important. You want to?
Yeah, it's interesting because oftentimes we think of Dr. King and Malcolm X as older, and Dr. King was 26 when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. So we were really intentional on casting younger actors that were the age that they were. And it is also a thing of when you're seeing these young people achieve these incredible things, I mean, we hope we can watch this and be inspired as well that we can do that.
Well, I don't want to open too many tabs on this, but I will say one of the things is that it also, there's a great domestic drama in this. You know, there's this remarkable scene, and I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what episode. Whoa, okay.
We're getting cheers from everybody.
Clearly, Dr. King and Malcolm from Heaven are pretty okay with this panel. There's a great scene, I can't remember what episode, so please forgive me, but where Martin can't get a job, and he gets a job, but it's like, we got to move to Montgomery, Alabama, and like they're having this domestic kind of like, I don't want to move there, it's way back and this, that, and you see this like, that's how history happened. Like literally around a kitchen table, two people decided like, I mean, okay, we'll make it work if we can. You talked about the think tank, you talked about that, like what were some of the, I guess, granular nuggets of their lives that you're like, oh, really? That was the thing?
Well, little things like finding out that both Martin and Malcolm were obsessed with ice cream. Like, that was beautiful. That's character. That's informing beyond the great speeches. Finding out how they both proposed to Betty and Coretta, and you mentioned this earlier, Dominic. Specifically finding out about Betty and Coretta. We have an hour dedicated to in the season specifically from their points of view, where Martin and Malcolm take a back seat. We only had 8 episodes, but we thought it was imperative that we gave those two civil rights icons in their own right the front stage, and learning about what made them tick and the mistakes and the way that they saw their relationship and how they navigated being married to these two particular men. Was extremely important. So one of the more gratifying parts of this project was bringing those two women to the forefront.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, just really kind of exploring who they were as humans. You know, they were humorous. You know, they were intense. They were thoughtful. You know, and showing that not necessarily within the strike points that I think we all come to know about these icons. You know, who were they as people? And so for us, I think one of the things that was just incredible to explore and hopefully bring to the audience was to show them in situations that we all can relate to, and see how they reacted. And it could be within humor, because both Martin and Malcolm were the funniest guys you can ever meet. But they also could dance. They also loved music. It was those small little details that we really wanted to kind of sink into to bring them to life.
And then one of the things, too, and it's to what Gina said, is like these were young men. And throughout it, you see them pushing up against an older order in terms of Martin with some of the clergy and what have you, and with Malcolm with Elijah Muhammad, to be honest, but also other elements of that. And there were these young men like pushing to get ahead. That is such a different way of thinking about them. I mean, you talked about how young Dr. King was when he did Montgomery, how young they were when they were killed, both of them. They were young men.
Both died at 39.
Yeah, young.
They're younger than LeBron James is now.
Yeah.
When they both died.
I don't know how to follow that up, Damione. That kind of
take it easy.
Do you think that that says anything about why they were able to be the people they were? Was it that time of the 50s? Let's take sort of from when the bus boycott onwards. Like it felt like it was a time for young people to do something. Is that just something I'm hearing? Or did you feel that when you were working on this?
Everybody's looking at me. Yeah, I mean, it always, to me, feels like it's a time for young people to do something, number one. And I think leaning into that was such an important thing for us. I mean,
because it was a huge creative choice. I mean, Gina brought up, you got, I mean, no disrespect,
sometimes
younger actors.
Sometimes we love we love all the other previous depictions of these men. You know, sometimes there's a tendency to cast people older than who they really were. So yeah, that was very, very important. It was a creative decision, but also intentional in that we do want to inspire everyone. We really want to inspire the youth. You know, but the youth really held down the civil rights movement. It's not to say that there weren't older people there, but it was a youth-driven movement. And you know, we would certainly love to continue to resurrect that spirit and that feeling in the country today.
The clip we saw was the one I talked about it in the intro, the only time they met. And to Raphael's point, is you see the two of them kind of trying to up each other about who has the biggest FBI file, which is kind of like, that's the conversation you really want to be a part of. Were there elements of this? There are stories about both men, about their lives, and they were both surveilled by the FBI. I don't know how to ask this in a way. Like, were those files helpful?
What we learned about the invasive part the FBI took in their lives gave us insight, not necessarily so much to the details of what the FBI was doing, but to how it emotionally impacted them as people. How Betty...
It was used as blackmail and all sorts of other things down the line.
And to try to break up their marriages, try to paint them in a way that they may or may not have put themselves in. That kind of information was invaluable to us as storytellers because that's the scene before the scene. It's the moment before the moment. What was Martin or Malcolm going through before they gave the I Have a Dream speech or before he gave the quote of by any means necessary? That's the thing that we were really most engaged in. And the little bit of that we did read about from our think tank about the FBI files, about them, really gave us insight about who they were as people and what they were going through.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. The creatives behind MLKX, genius.